When my son called 3 days after Christmas to ask me for $25,000, I had already changed my will. Good day, and welcome. I'm Antonia, and if you've found your way to Emma's Stories, I'm so glad you're here with me. Please stay until the end, and let me know in the comments what city or state you're listening from. It means more than you know to hear how far these words travel. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a school librarian in a small town in central Ohio. I raised my son in that town. I buried my husband there. And for every one of those years, I spent the holidays surrounded by the smell of my grandmother's molasses cookie recipe and the sound of Christmas carols on the old record player my husband absolutely refused to get rid of, no matter how many times I teased him about it. After my husband passed, 4 years ago this past November, the holidays got quieter. That is the honest word for it. Not sad, exactly, just quieter. Our son Gavin and his wife Yvette lived about 5 hours away in Nashville. They had 2 children, my grandchildren, Cleo, who had just turned 6 that fall, and little Remy, who was 4. The plan, the one we had all talked about loosely when my husband was still alive, was that once I was on my own, I would become more present in their everyday lives. Not underfoot, I had never been that kind of mother, but present. A regular voice on the phone, a standing Sunday dinner, maybe. Someone the children thought of as permanent, not just occasional. That is not what happened. The first year after my husband passed, I drove down to Nashville and stayed for 10 days. Yvette was polite. That is the word I kept reaching for, then and now. Not warm, polite. She was careful with me the way you are with someone you feel obligated to accommodate. I told myself she was private. Some people are. I told myself I was reading too much into small things and that grief had made me sensitive. The second year, Gavin called in late November to say they were spending Christmas with Yvette's family in Savannah. He sounded genuinely apologetic. He promised to drive up to see me in January. January came. He did not. By the third year, I had decided I would not be the one to push. I would wait to be invited. I would not suggest. I would not hint. I would simply leave the door open and wait for one of them to walk through it. But October passed without a word. November passed. The first week of December, I sent Gavin a text asking about their Christmas plans, careful to make it light. He replied 2 days later. "We're still figuring things out, Mom. I'll let you know." I waited. Another week. I sent another message. "Don't worry about making a big thing out of it. Just let me know what works." His reply came the next afternoon. "We've got it handled, Mom. I'll be in touch." Got what handled. I turned that phrase over in my mind for days. I wasn't asking to manage anything. I was his mother. I was asking whether I would see my grandchildren at Christmas. I made a decision that I am not entirely proud of, looking back. I decided to just go. I told myself it would be a wonderful surprise, that they would open the door and be delighted. I baked Cleo's favorite snickerdoodles. I found a hand-painted wooden train set at a craft fair back in September. I had bought it the moment I saw it, because Remy had been obsessed with trains since he was 2. I wrapped everything carefully. I put Gavin's favorite bourbon in a gift bag. The good kind he had mentioned once when we were talking on the phone about nothing in particular. I loaded my car on December 23rd, sang along to the radio for 5 hours, and pulled into their driveway at 3 in the afternoon feeling, for the first time in months, like myself again. Through the front window, I could see the Christmas tree lit up, people moving around inside, the glow of what looked like a fire in the fireplace. My heart lifted, all that worrying for nothing. They were home, and the house was full, and Christmas was happening. And I was about to walk through that door and see Cleo's face. I rang the doorbell. Yvette opened it. She was dressed nicely, a dark red blouse, hair done. She was in the middle of something. Behind her I could see her parents at the table, her sister, people I didn't recognize, and a few I did. A whole house full of people, all of them inside, and there I was on the step with a tin of cookies. She looked at me the way you look at something unexpected you find on your doorstep. Not a person, a thing to be dealt with. Antonia, she did not open the door wider, she did not move aside. "Merry Christmas." I held up the tin. I know it's a surprise, but I thought, Who told you to come? Her voice was flat and low, not angry exactly, more tired. The way someone sounds when something inconvenient has happened at the wrong time. Did Gavin invite you? I hadn't heard back, so I just wanted. This is a family gathering, she said. Our family. You weren't invited. I don't understand why you think it's acceptable to show up without being asked. She folded her arms. You need to leave. I heard Cleo laughing somewhere inside the house, that bright, unself-conscious laugh. I had driven 5 hours to hear that sound, and I was standing in the cold being turned away like a stranger. I said Yvette's name. I said something about the children, something about Christmas, something, I'm not sure what. She shook her head. I'm going to close the door, she said. Please don't ring the bell again. And she did. I stood on that porch in the December air long enough for my face to go cold. I could hear the muffled sound of conversation resuming inside, as if a minor disruption had been handled and life had moved on. I set the cookies on the porch. I set the gifts beside them, the train set for Remy, the things for Cleo, the bag with Gavin's bourbon. I walked back to my car and I drove away. I made it about 2 miles before I had to pull over. I sat in a church parking lot for a long time. I ran the whole thing back through my mind, looking for what I had done wrong. Trying to find the place where this was a misunderstanding, a terrible miscommunication, something with an explanation that would make it make sense. I could not find one. It was close to midnight when I got home. I did not go to bed. I sat at my kitchen table under the one light I'd left on, opened my laptop, and went through every financial record I had from the last 3 years. The time Yvette's car needed a new transmission, and I covered it without hesitation, $4,000. The Florida vacation they took because Gavin said they were both burned out and needed a break, and I wanted to help, $3,000. The down payment assistance I'd given them when they bought the Nashville house, meant to be a loan, never mentioned again, $18,000. The smaller things. Birthday money, contributions to the children's savings accounts, a few emergency transfers when Gavin texted that things were tight. I added it all up. In 3 years, I had given them just over $30,000. I thought about the Christmas invitation that never came. I thought about Yvette's face when she opened that door. Not shocked, not embarrassed, just inconvenienced. I thought about Cleo laughing inside a warm house while I stood outside of it. I am not a dramatic woman. My husband used to say I was the most even-keeled person he had ever met, and he meant it as a compliment. I do not make decisions out of anger, but I sat at that table until the sky out started going gray, and by the time the birds started up, I knew what I was going to do. I called my attorney the next morning. Frederick Ames had handled my husband's estate, our will, everything. He had known us for over 20 years. When I told him what had happened, not with emotion, just the facts, the door, the words, the long drive home, he was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do, Antonia? He asked. I want to change my will, I said. Gavin removed entirely. And I want to set up a separate trust for the grandchildren. Accessible when they turn 25, administered by a third party. Not through Gavin. Not through Yvette. I don't want to punish Cleo and Remy for what their parents are. But I will not put money into Gavin and Yvette's hands and call it love. There was a pause. Then Frederick said something that has stayed with me. The fact that you're thinking of the grandchildren separately. That's the right instinct. Whatever happens between you and your son, those children are not part of it. I signed the documents on December 28th. The house, the retirement accounts, the life insurance, everything went to causes that had mattered to my husband and to me. A children's literacy foundation, the county library system where I had spent my career, the hospice that had cared for my husband in his final weeks. The grandchildren's trust sat separately, clean and protected, waiting for them to be old enough to receive it without anyone else's hands involved. 3 days after Christmas, Gavin called. Hey, Mom, he sounded casual. Easy, not a word about Nashville. How was your holiday? Quiet, I said. Good, good. A pause. Listen, I wanted to run something by you. There's an investment opportunity. A friend of mine is launching a business, and I think it's going to do really well. We're hoping to put in 25,000. I know it's a lot to ask, but you've always believed in me. No, I said. Silence. Mom, did you hear me? This is a real opportunity. The returns on something like this. I heard you. The answer is no. I kept my voice very level. I won't be giving money anymore, to you or to Yvette. Is this about Christmas? Because Yvette told me you just showed up without saying anything, and honestly, Mom, you can't just… I drove 5 hours on December 23rd, I said. Your wife told me I wasn't family and closed the door in my face. And 3 days later, you're calling to ask for $25,000. I think we both understand what's happening. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you're being dramatic. I told him goodbye and hung up. He called back 4 times. I did not answer. He sent 2 texts, one saying I was overreacting, one explaining that Yvette had been stressed and that I needed to have more understanding. I read them both and set my phone face down on the counter and went to make tea. They came to my house on New Year's Eve. I saw Gavin's car pull into my driveway and watched both of them walk to my door. I had not invited them. I opened the door before they could knock. Yvette spoke first. She had apparently decided that the best approach was businesslike, as if we were colleagues clearing up a misunderstanding. We need to talk about the will, she said. There's nothing to discuss, I said. I've made my decision. Mom, please. Gavin stepped forward. He was trying to look calm. Can we come in? We can work this out. There's nothing to work out. I did not move aside. I'm not angry. I'm not trying to punish anyone. I've made a choice about my own life. That is my right. Yvette's composure came apart. That inheritance belonged to Gavin. You don't get to take it away because you had your feelings hurt. I can do whatever I choose with what I have. This is insane. She laughed, but there was nothing in it. We asked you to leave one time and you're burning everything down? Gavin has been your son for 39 years. You owe him. I looked at my son. You knew, I said. You knew she was going to turn me away and you let it happen. He looked at the ground. That was my answer. You let her close that door, I said quietly. You knew I was coming and you didn't say a word to me. Not a warning, not an apology, not a phone call, nothing. I waited until he looked up. I would like you both to leave. If you come back uninvited, I'll call the police. Yvette said something as they walked to the car. I didn't try to hear it. I closed my door, locked it, and stood in my hallway and breathed. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something harder to name. The feeling of having finally said the thing you have been swallowing for a very long time. The months that followed were not simple. I want to be honest about that. I missed Gavin, not the man who had stood on my porch with his eyes on the pavement while his wife called my feelings an inconvenience, but the boy I had raised, who used to fall asleep against my shoulder on long drives, who called me every Sunday through college just to talk about nothing in particular. I grieved that version of him. I think I had been grieving him for longer than I knew and just hadn't been willing to say it out loud. But I also started doing something I had put off for years. I started living. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center 2 towns over. I was spectacularly bad at it, in a way that made me laugh out loud at my own lopsided trees and muddy skies, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. I joined the book club at my old library, the one I'd watched other people enjoy for years from behind the reference desk. I started volunteering on Thursday afternoons at the pediatric ward of the county hospital, reading to kids who were stuck in beds and needed someone to sit with them. It was the thing that felt most like myself. In February, a woman named Cecilia joined the book club. She was 71, recently retired from teaching high school English, and she had a dry, precise humor that caught me off guard the first time she made me laugh. We had coffee after the second meeting and have had it nearly every week since. She didn't pepper me with questions about my family, but when I eventually told her what had happened, she didn't flinch. Some children figure it out, she said, and some don't. Either way, you get to have a life in the meantime. She is exactly the kind of friend I did not know I was missing. In April, I drove to Vermont by myself for a week. I stayed at a small inn, hiked 2 trails, ate dinner alone at the same corner table every evening. I did not feel lonely once. I felt like a person who had somewhere to be. Gavin called once in March, not to apologize, to talk about getting back to normal, a phrase that told me he had very little understanding of what normal had actually been. I told him I wished him well. I meant it. He has not called since. I don't know what their life looks like now. I have made my peace with not knowing. What I do know is this. Cleo and Remy have a trust in their names. When Cleo turns 25, she will find something waiting for her. Funds from a grandmother who loved her even when loving her was complicated. Remy the same. I made certain of that before I changed anything else. Whatever their parents do with their lives, those children will know, someday, that someone set something aside. Something separate. Something that was never about the score between adults. Frederick told me it was the right call. Cecilia said the same when I explained it over coffee. I think they are right. When you strip away all the rest of it, the hurt, the money, the door closing in December, what remains is that Cleo and Remy did not choose any of this. They didn't choose their parents, any more than I chose a daughter-in-law, who looked at me like a problem to be handled. The least I could do was make sure those children knew they were never forgotten. This past Christmas, I spent the holiday with Cecilia and a woman from book club whose daughter lives overseas and couldn't make it home. We cooked together in Cecilia's kitchen, which is warm and slightly chaotic and smells like garlic and old wood. We had wine. We watched a movie we had all seen before and argued cheerfully about which parts had aged well. I drove home at 10 in the evening feeling full in a way that had nothing to do with food. I have thought, honestly, about what I wish I had done differently. I wish I had seen the pattern sooner, the rhythm of giving followed by warmth, followed by distance, repeating over and over while I told myself I was imagining it. I wish I had understood earlier that being needed and being loved are not the same thing. They can look identical from a certain angle, and I spent years standing at that angle. But I don't wish I had been a different kind of mother. I gave because I wanted to, because it was who I was. I was not wrong to believe that love is something you show. What I was wrong about was assuming it always flows in both directions. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the person you give everything to looks at you through a screen door on a cold December afternoon and sees nothing but an inconvenience. But here is what I know, and I want you to hear this clearly. The story does not end at the door. I am 67 years old. I paint badly and happily every Wednesday. I read to sick children on Thursdays. I have coffee with my friend every week and argue about books and laugh at things that wouldn't be funny to anyone else. My will reflects what I actually value. My grandchildren's trust reflects that they were never part of the argument between the adults. I am not lonely. I am not bitter. I am, if I am being honest with you, more like myself than I have been in years. Your worth is not decided by who opens the door to let you in. It is decided, quietly, one watercolor class at a time, one Thursday afternoon at a time, by you. If you are somewhere right now feeling unseen by someone who was supposed to love you, the story can change, not the past. You cannot rewrite the door closing in your face. But everything that comes after belongs entirely to you. Thank you for being here with me today. Please tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and if this story found you at the right moment, I hope you'll stay for the next one.